It's Saturday morning. The next day after celebrating the old New Year, which was on Friday the 13th in full moon. What normal person would start the next morning discussing the taxes? Only the crazy ones. Who, except for Vladimir Mao, could have this crazy idea to time and to schedule the key session of the whole forum on Saturday morning? And it seems that the rector of the academy made all the students come here this morning to have a quorum and to show to the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Economic Development that we have full house here and to show respect and attention to the experts. Okay, well, it seems to me that it's really important that our session was scheduled for today after yesterday. Two most important things have been stated. Answering the question, the Minister of Finance, when he was asked, does the Ministry of Finance think? He said, yes, the Ministry of Finance thinks. He could have answered always, or well, it's a matter of debate, but anyway, this makes it possible for us today to try, just to try, to understand what the Ministry of Finance thinks. And number two, yesterday, Igor Shuvalov said that he thought that the quality of economic growth, since now our key goal is economic growth, and everybody says this, and this depends, first of all, on the tax policy. And in this situation, we have a very pleasant situation. We have to ask Maksim Oreshkin, have his opinions of the tax policy changed when he changed his seat and came to the ministry? And what does Anton Siluanov think about progressive taxation? Is it now being considered or not? Oh, sorry, that was my brief introduction, but we have fantastic panelists, fantastic experts who know everything in the world. We see people here, the ones who will have to pay the taxes which will be enacted by those who are sitting close to me. We also have Mr. Murylev, and we have another person who's just watching what these crazy Russians, what other crazy idea these crazy Russians will invent in terms of tax policy. And I very much hope that each of our experts, each of our panelists will be able to convey to you his opinion. That's the end of my introduction. And let me start by a very important question, which really concerns me. I'd like to address the Minister of Economic Development. How do the thoughts of tax policy change depending on which ministry you work at? The Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Economic Development. I think it's a broader discussion. We perfectly well understand that taxes, this is not just about budget, but this is the whole instrument that influences the economic activities in the country. When we discuss what kind of tax system we have, how we have to change it, we need to first understand how it influences the interbudgetary relations, the structure of economy, the economic development, because we always say that we want stability and predictability for the business. It's not just the tax rate that it is important, but also the understanding of how the tax system is going to change in future. Because if the business has a foreseeable future, only then the businesses can plan their business. And like I said when I was at the Ministry of Finance, I'm saying it again, the tax system can be stable if the budget system is stable. Sorry, colleagues, yesterday I was too polite. I had Igor Shuvalov, the first vice prime minister, and I was not supposed to cut him short, but today I don't have him nearby, so I can do whatever I like. So we have now heard what our Minister of Economic Development who said what is important and what is good for the tax system, and I always like simple questions. My question to you is as follows. Our president set two tasks. On the one hand, he said 2017 should be the year of discussion of what further fine-tuning of tax system should be done. He was talking about this, not just fine-tuning, but further fine-tuning. And I think that today we're going to spend some time at our forum to discuss what it means, this fine-tuning, and what Putin meant. Are we supposed to discuss the progressive tax rate or not? And the second thing Putin said is, budget-wise, we need to cut the budget deficit by 1% a year. So tell us, we repeat this mantra, we should not increase the tax burden. And how do these goals correlate? Non-increase of tax burden and reduction of budget deficit. How are you going to reduce it? And could you please answer less theoretically than Maksim Oreshkin? I know that by the middle of our discussion, he'll finally start saying what he really thinks. Thank you for your question. Good morning, dear colleagues. You know, when we really talk about the tax burden, and that we should not increase it in the coming future, in the near future. The taxes are an instrument of economic, fiscal, and other policies, and this also influences the economic growth. And the logic is that we want our tax system competitive without increasing the tax burden, but increasing its efficiency on the one hand, but on the other hand, we don't have to forget about our budget, because the taxes are the money which we use to fund our commitments. And if we now have a disbalance between our income and commitments, and this budget deficit last year was 3.56 to be exact, 3.56% of GDP. So Andrei Makarov is right to say, how are we going to reduce this budget deficit? Are we going to keep it the way it is now? Are we going to fund it due to the provisions that are depleting, or due to borrowing in the financial markets, washing out all liquidity from the market, or by increasing taxes, or by cutting the expenses? And Andrei's question is the key one. How is the state going to act in this context? Either the state is going to withdraw some money from the economy, or reduce its commitments, or take all the liquidity from the market. Like yesterday, somebody said it's easier to invest into some securities, sit and wait for the dividends. And that's what we discuss. And when we say that the tax system is an element of the economic policy of a country, I think this is what we should do. Number one, the tax burden should not be increased. Can we reduce it? Yes, we can reduce it if we reduce our expense commitments. Will we be able to reduce our cost commitments without increasing the budget deficit? Fairly speaking, this would be really hard to do in the coming 3 years. And we want to reduce this budget disbalance due to two things. Number one, we are going to improve the tax administration without increasing taxes. And number two is administration of costs, which should be more efficient, and inefficient costs should be cancelled and excluded. This is what the Chamber of Audits is always telling us, that a lot of costs are incurred inefficiently. Don't interrupt me. Honestly, this is not the State Duma, and here nobody will give you an extra 5 minutes. Now you are going to talk about the attorney's office, the Chamber of Audits, and I will tell you about the investigations committee, and then the businesses will be happy because this is what they are interested in. But tell me something. Haven't you noticed that at the moment that when Andrei said that the tax burden should not increase, he was sure when saying this, but when he said that could it really get lower, his face was really sad, like the sad face of him we saw yesterday. Yes, he said now that this is not true, but nobody heard it because his microphone is turned off. You know, whether we reduce the tax burden or not, these discussions, don't you think that these discussions are just being held to discuss it? The ministers have not very thoroughly read the program of the United Russia, I guess. Oh, yes, this is the right thing to say. We were participating in the development of the economic chapter of this program of United Russia, and we wrote it down. Probably nobody noticed it, but we wrote it down in that chapter that we need to reduce the tax burden. Otherwise, we will be doomed to inert development of economy. And it's not 3.54%, but 2%. This is what we are aiming at. And it's not 3.4 or 4%. Prime Minister Medvedev was talking about 2 days ago. Because we don't have many opportunities to change something. We have to radically improve the business climate and reduce the fiscal burden on businesses. And I would like to thank the Ministry of Finance and the Minister of Finance for the fact that the methodology of Russian Chamber of Trade and Commerce was integrated into this program of United Russia in terms of assessment of tax burden and so on. Could you please give us now, briefly and once and for all, the whole list of those who you would like to thank? I would like to thank the Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Economic Development if I have a reason to. So, number one, I think we have to very clearly state that we are going to strive to reduce the fiscal burden on businesses. Are we going to strive to or to reduce it? To reduce it, but we need to have common understanding. On the first day of our forum, there was a discussion about this, but we didn't discuss what has to be reduced, how should the tax system be further fine-tuned. The discussion was about what discussions are currently ongoing in the society about the personal taxes, personal income tax, and so on. And of course, I would like to know what you think about the increase of the VAT by 2% and other initiatives the Ministry of Finance suggested for public discussion. Are they still on the agenda of discussion? Why are you concerned when the Ministry of Finance discusses the VATs? You are concerned about it, and when social charges are being discussed, you are silent. No, I'm not silent. No, I disagree. I disagree with what you said. Some ministers are members of the United Russia and participate in preparation of the documents of the party. This is my first comment, political comment. Number two, when we say that we need to reduce the tax burden, Could you please say what cost we will have to cut if we want to cut the tax burden? If you ask me, am I for reducing the tax burden? Of course I am. But tell me what cost we can reduce to do so. We are very much for reducing the taxes, really. Like Stanislavski said, I don't believe you. Okay, tell me, Alexander, what costs are we going to cut? Well, number one, like it was in early 2000s, after we introduced these 13% flat tax rates, we mean that by reducing the fiscal burden on businesses, we will expand the taxable base, the taxable income in future. But we need to structure it up to 2025. Or now, for instance, 2017, we are going to spend the whole year on discussions. Next year, we will enact the new tax laws, the amendments to the tax code, and we will declare a moratorium till 2025. No, you are going to discuss, and we are going to adopt and enact. Okay, but the uncertainty with respect to tax system will only increase. We know for sure that since 2019, the tax system is going to be different from what it is now. No, 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 you should not say this. You should not say that now we reduce the taxes and later on sometime we will get some additional income. And how are we going to pay salaries to pay people? How are we going to cover the social costs and commitments? We cannot tell people, let's try to survive somehow for 3 years. We cannot tell them, let's now shrink here, reduce this, and then maybe in 3 years everything will become perfect again. No. It's no good to say that now we'll reduce the taxes and then later on a lot of money will come into our economy and budget. We have heard these talks for many times. Sorry. Those people who are awake this morning, they can watch this battle, this discussion. Let's continue it. Do you think we can consider Maksim Oreshkin, who came to the Ministry of Economic Development from the Ministry of Finance, can we consider him a fair arbiter in this case? Okay, let's come back to another important question. We are discussing, should we increase, should we decrease tax burden? But tax burden or taxes, because this is different. Somebody says we should reduce the VAT, somebody says the insurance charges should be reduced. I don't see any big difference between them and taxes. As far as I remember, when you worked at the Ministry of Finance, you tried to prove that the tax burden in our country is not a big one, it's not a high one. It was not long ago, and I remember it perfectly well. And the Ministry of Finance always compared our tax burden in Russia with OECD countries' tax burdens, and we always tried to say, probably we shouldn't compare our tax burden with the United States or Germany, but with those with whom we can compete in this market, with the BRICS countries and so on. So before we continue this discussion that was started between Alexander Shokhin and Anton Siluanov, the question is, what's the actual tax burden in our country? Is it high? Is it unbelievably high? Is it low? Or whatever. If you remember what we just heard in our discussion, if we reduce the taxes, increase tax collectability, what about your opinion? Do you think any ministry can cancel what welfare said? Do you think our tax policy will be able to cancel it? No, no, no. The basic laws cannot be cancelled. So talking about possible reduction of laws or tax burden, we shouldn't talk about the money that will come to the budget later on. We have to talk about other things. And here we have a theoretical and practical approach. The theoretical approach is to calculate how much taxes we collect, correlate that with the GDP and so on. Sorry, we agreed that theory, we don't listen to it. After our session, we'll have a 45 minutes report by Sinelnikov and Murylev. So, okay, talking about real businesses, if you ask a business people, is the tax burden high? They will say yes. And the question is, who pays the taxes and who doesn't? If you take fully legal, transparent businesses, for them the tax burden is high. If we didn't have any shadow economy, then theoretically the tax burden would have been much higher. So the main task is to reduce the scope of shadow economy, and then the tax receipts will look different. We have insurance charges, we have a VAT 5.2, we have also the flat personal income tax, and if we look at VAT, we have good administering, good practices, and we can cover all the bottlenecks, and we can talk with businesses. I have a lot of acquaintances in medium enterprises, and we see that more and more companies do pay VATs. If you look at the social insurance charges, at personal income tax, it used to be 4.3% of GDP a couple of years ago, while now it's only 3% of GDP, the collection of personal income tax, which means that there is something wrong there, and the tax burden, you are right, we have to compare comparable countries. In no other country we have such a social charges, insurance charges as in Russia. So this is the biggest problem. We have a big shadow business which doesn't pay this, and we have to solve this problem. So are we talking about the tax rate or the tax burden? You said the recipe is to combat the shadow economy. Mr. Shokhin said we need to reduce the tax burden. We can accuse him of anything except for the fact that he is the head of organization which is related to shadow economy. Your predecessor was a member of one of such organizations. You know what we are talking about. No, I don't mean you. I'm talking about the Ministry of Economy. So the tax burden or the tax weights should be reduced. What exactly are we talking about? The companies that pay all the taxes, the tax burden should be reduced. Okay. So the general goal is to reduce the tax burden for companies, for good taxpayer companies. Okay, good. Andrei. I would like to understand something. From my point of view, you very perfectly described the connection between the budget and the tax policy. If you want to reduce the budget deficit, how? And you were right to say that if we reduce the tax burden, we will win in future. But in future, if we solve the problem of shadow economy, of course. But the salaries and pensions, they need to be paid today, not in 3 years. So the question is, and we discussed it half a year ago at the first parliament hearings at the State Duma, why? In this case, we have 3 different policies of the government. We have the main fundamentals of the tax policy, of the budget policy, of the customs and tariffs policy. This should be a single policy, not three different documents, because when you read them, you have an impression that these are documents made for different countries, so different they are. We do stand on a single stand, and we also discussed that we need to have one document for all to describe all the main lines of the budget policy, including the tax policy, the budget policy, financial markets policy, the lending policy, and all this is what the government does, and it should be all regulated by a single document. And then the discussion of the document would be more efficient, because we won't have to discuss three different documents. Maybe they are being prepared by different people, but no, I'm not discussing what should be. Everybody knows what should be, but I'm looking at the government's plan for the coming 6 months till summer, and I see main provisions of the tax law, main provisions of the customs and tariffs policy, main provisions of the budget policy. You are going to prepare the fundamentals of the tax policy. The Ministry of Economic Development will prepare maybe the customs policy. But why is it so? Why? Yes, we understand that we need to change the budget code and everything. Let's adopt them, and you will work on a single document, and everybody would understand that the budget policy and the tax policy is the essence of economic policy. Absolutely. And we don't even have to vote for this. If nobody thinks that we need to have three documents, it's evident we need one. No, yes, you know, yesterday I suggested the questions for voting, but yesterday somebody told me, let's not vote, it won't work, and so on. But if the program says that we have to reduce the taxes, let's do so without any voting. Absolutely. Yes, this idea is fully supported, 100% supported, and we are going to suggest these amendments to the current law together with other amendments to be made. And if I may, I would still come back to the question of tax burden. Is it high? Is it low? As a representative of the Ministry of Finance, I'd like to say, when we talk about the tax burden, look at the other side of the moon. What commitments we have. If you take Kazakhstan, where the tax burden is 25%, in our country, it's 33, 32% of GDP. So if you take India, it's 20%. So let's see what kind of social commitments they have, what kind of pensions they pay. Do they have similar defense spendings? Because it's a nuclear country, they have to sustain their military, and they have to invest into new technologies in defense industry. Not every country has such commitments. If we want to have a good social policy, if you want to have a strong army, somebody has to pay for this. Who's going to pay for this? The taxpayers. When we talk about the taxes, we have to speak about and think about the other aspect, where these taxes are spent. Are they spent efficiently or inefficiently? But the taxes always are considered in one document.
Excuse me. Chamber of Commerce and Industry. You have various types of businesses there, and you represent their point of view. For you, this discussion on reducing the tax burden, what does it mean for you? And I tell you why I'm asking this. For economic growth, tax burden, they are directly linked, right? Well, we hear people say, expenses, right. You have to pay salaries, pensions, right. There's shadow business, right. But how to break this circle? We kind of follow a circle. We cannot reduce tax burden because we have commitments, but we cannot assure economic growth at this level of tax burden. Thank you, Andrei. I think the level of non-tax payments right now is so high, so that we rather talk about a fiscal burden on business, not only tax. Non-tax charges in some regions have 70 such charges, and it's close to 1% of GDP right now. It's a serious burden on the business. And it's different for different types of businesses. And within one sector of the economy, it could be different. Like auto transportation, the ones who provide the service inside cities pay differently from the people who provide these services to other countries. Also, oil and gas industry and other industries, these vary. And I do think that we talk too much about the tax burden, forgetting about this other important burden of non-tax charges. And this is serious for some types of businesses. It's really a big burden. Now, Andrei, on the quality of the economy. I think we speak only in these terms, increasing tax or reducing tax. Every businessman would tell you, reduce tax. But here I agree with Anton. We cannot do that. In the coming 3 years, we cannot reduce the tax burden because there are no things that can replace taxes. But if we consider a tax system not as a fiscal system, but like Maksim said, it's a tool stimulating the economy. We have an example quoted by the president himself, when the reduction of tax on IT companies immediately produced growth in the exports of their services to foreign markets. Excuse me. Well, you had disagreement, Anton, and with Anton. Alexander, it's not you. Well, I started my career in the Gosplan. I know all the rules. You ask for more, and you get more. Well, Gosplan, I understand this is a burden on you, your past. Well, but I have a question to Anton. Mr. Siluanov, well, there's a request to the Ministry of Finance asking for money. If they don't provide sufficient justification, then the easiest thing to do is to divide it by 2 and tell them we think next time. This is news number 1, like our friends here and our partners say. For all agencies, have a look at the method used by Ministry of Finance. Whenever you request money, they would divide it by 2. Well, we can do it differently. Of course, if they don't thank you for that, you will divide it by 4 next time. But I'm talking about a different thing. I think you said it fairly, that the reduction of tax burden offered today, incomes are going to be higher tomorrow, and you have to pay pensions today. Like there was an example, the reduction in tax burden on IT technology immediately produced increase in exports, like what we started from. Progressive taxation scale. We had that, now we have a flat rate. But when we changed to a flat rate, there was an increase on 40% of taxes collected. And then next year follows with 30% increase. So it's not evident that the reduction in tax burden would produce an effect for the future. Or you disagree with what the president said? Andrei. Olga Golodets would disagree with everybody. You don't have to follow her example. Well, the reduction of insurance charges on IT companies, and that was a serious reduction, and that benefit for IT companies, the case you quoted, resulted in IT companies, or some of those companies, because the level of tax burden on those companies, mainly salaries, they don't have to have fixed assets, a lot of equipment, etc. Their main expense is salaries. If we reduce burden on salaries, on payroll, then of course they feel much better. They don't have to go abroad to do their business. Actually, my question is, why so many Russian companies go abroad to not pay taxes in Russia? And I asked representative of Mr. Bastrykin, they would check on those companies. Okay, when we say tax burden, etc., this subject is quite philosophical, but if we want to be more practical, let us talk about the structure of tax burden. When we say we reduced burden on payroll of IT companies, immediately they went into the white. It stimulated them to show their real revenues, etc., and that increased the collection of taxes. So when we talk about the structure of tax burden, we can state the burden on payroll is too high. It's more than in any other country of the world. Other companies, in other countries, it's individuals who pay insurance fees, not the companies. And we have 30% plus income tax. It's too high a burden. When talking about tax burden, a structure is what we should be talking about. Reduction in direct taxes, reduction in indirect taxes, that may produce the required effect. May I agree with the Minister of Finance for this correct statement. You thanked him 2 times already. Don't do it a 3rd time. Well, the coefficient of 2 when people ask them for money will not change. Let's split this matter into 2. One thing, Anton answered the first time, and having answered the first part in terms of insurance charges on payroll, it's clear what you talk about. And the second part, you kind of drew it too finely. And what I mean in particular is this: when you say structure of tax burden, will you be ready to include in the tax burden non-tax payments and recalculate the tax burden, including those non-tax payments which are not regulated by the tax code, but the companies have to pay those anyway? Non-tax payments. If it's insurance charges, no. It's more than 30 such non-tax charges. It will take too much time to list them all here. And they're serious. Actually, they're about 70. But the bigger ones are 37 payments that companies have to pay. But let me tell you this, unlike tax payments, the Chamber of Audits or any ministry do not control how non-tax payments are spent. What are these non-tax payments? What port charges, water use charges? This money stays with the same industry normally, where these monies are collected. This does not go to the budget, mainly stay within the industry where they are charged. Let's be honest there. Let's make the analysis. I know the initiative of the State Duma. There was a suggestion to draw a code of non-tax payments or a law on non-tax charges, structuring all of them similarly to taxes. What I suggest, that should be added to the tax code. It should be added to the tax code. Then the Chamber of Audits, the Investigation Committee, etc., will check on the use of those funds. Obligatory payments, public payments, we need a separate law for them in addition to the tax code. There's a conflict of interest. Sergey has said, and he put it mildly, that money goes into the industry. What do we mean in mind when we say the industry? Who are the people who get that money? And they're trying to regulate that at the level of the tax code would mean that the single authority would administer all those payments. And that authority would have to follow definite procedures. As a result, there would not be any direct shadows agreements between businessmen and that current authority that takes this money. I have one example. There's a charge on tax on means of production. And that charge is supposed to go into the industry. But we managed to have a decision made that we do not pay that charge. This is such a situation where you have to agree with a definite authority whether you pay or not pay, which is not fair. Administering is, well, the tax authority should administer that, but and that should be similar to the procedure from the tax code. Well, what taxes are introduced or non-taxes introduced is a matter of law. Therefore, agreeing with anybody or whether you pay or not should be regulated by the legislature. Unfortunately, today, some businessmen believe that whether they pay tax or not, it will be decided at the level of individual meetings and agreements. I believe this is the most frightening thing, the biggest scourge of the tax system. Like the president told us, you have a year to discuss it. And in 2018, we make a decision, and we have a stable system. That's what he has said. We will not lobby our interests, individual businesses, of whether to impose a charge or not. But I forget one thing. We have a person for whom our discussion, well, let's ask that person directly. We have Deputy Director of Center on Tax Policy and Administration, Ms. Navarro. I have maybe a simple question, maybe it's complex. You're listening to our discussion. What do you think about it? You're laughing. Oh, let's give her a round of applause for laughing like this.
It's been a fascinating discussion, and not all that different from discussions that you have in other countries about tax reform. Whenever you're talking about taxation, it's a highly provocative and difficult issue. So while these discussions have been quite frank, I think, which is very good, at the same time, I think they need to be had in order to come up with a good and sound tax reform. It sounds like you have the challenge that most other countries face, which is how do you finance the services that your government needs to finance when you have budget deficits, when you have things like declining oil prices, etc., without trying to increase the tax. That is a big challenge. What most countries try to do then is to reinforce the enforcement of the taxes. And so we've talked about the shadow economy. That is a common issue for many countries. And there, Russia has already taken, I think, some very good steps in terms of increasing the effectiveness of its tax administration and the collection of the tax laws already on the books. And I'm referring to the introduction that will be coming next year of automatic exchange of information so that people will no longer be able to hide their assets and income offshore. Russia has been a very active participant and proponent of our base erosion and profit shifting project so that you don't have multinational companies being able to legally escape paying tax through legal arrangements that do not have any economic substance. And so implementing those measures, improving the transfer pricing rules, etc., will help Russia increase its tax collection based on just the existing laws. Now, of course, you can look at the tax rates. You've been talking a lot about the tax burden. I mean, if I look at it, and I know you don't want to compare to OECD countries, but keep in mind, the OECD has a very broad range of countries, and so when you look at our averages, I think it's a useful measure just to compare. And your corporate tax rate at 20% is not out of the norm. And right now, many countries are thinking, oh, we have to get even more competitive. Following the economic crisis, a lot of tax rates went up, not so much in the corporate area, mostly personal income tax rates and VAT rates to try and achieve fiscal consolidation. But you have, I think, a fairly decent corporate tax rate. Your VAT rate is lower than what the average VAT rate in OECD countries. Keep in mind, again, as a result of the economic crisis, VAT rates were raised. Why? Because that's the quickest way to get money into the pockets of the government. So that's another thing you need to think about. In terms of improving the business environment, I know people often look at tax policy, but you need to remember whenever you look at the studies that have been done about what is it that drives investment in businesses, businesses will not say it's the tax rate that is number one. There are other things that are far more important, like political stability, like lack of corruption, like having regulations and laws that are administered in a fair and equitable manner, having certainty about how those laws will be applied. But we're here to talk about tax today, and so in improving tax certainty, if you have a low rate, a broad base, a simple tax, that is something that business will desire because that gives some sort of predictability. That predictability should come not just from the rate, but also from how the tax is administered. And so having things like effective dispute resolution mechanisms, that is also something that's very important. So you've got a lot of challenging issues here that you've already identified, but I think that taking a holistic approach, looking at the tax system as a whole, tax policy, tax administration, looking at the different rates and the overall composition of your taxes will help you achieve a reasonable reform.
Thank you. Вы знаете, вот я...
I'm listening. I've listened to what you say. Simple tax. We'll get back to that. And I watched the face of our academic guru as I listened. Sergey Sinelnikov-Murylev. Initially, he seemed to be very grim. And initially, it seemed that he disagreed from our partner from OECD. Then he started smiling. In this particular case, my question is not about tax. What did you disagree with, and why did you suddenly start smiling as you listened to OECD? Thank you for giving me the floor. Well, we agreed that you would be speaking. Andrei, very difficult challenge. Why? Because you have this art of moderating such conferences or moderating meetings in the Duma. Well, I'm a lawyer. I'm used to being paid for the hour. That's why I like talking. Well, you do it brilliantly. and suddenly you move the whole direction of the conversation in a different way. So I apologize to the audience before I'm going to say anything, because I don't know which direction he was pointing at this time. Okay. What I wanted to say is this. I like this discussion, although Andrei did not give the opportunity to speak to everybody. You mentioned me for the fourth time, but you should thank Siluanov for that, like Shokhin did. Shokhin gave a good example, referring everything to Siluanov. And the Minister of Economic Development, you can also thank him. And now I feel you're going to talk about my tax declaration or something else. May I answer your question, please? You keep, Andrei, as I listen to the discussion, I have something to add about tax burden. In the world, tax burden as GDP, and it's a normal measurement, normal indicator. I don't think that tax burden has any effect on the efficiency of the business. In simpler terms, it is project-based calculation, how much tax affects the profitability of a particular project. Well, what's most important for the project, though, is what the project earns before tax. So tax is not that important for the efficiency of business. Is it high or low tax burden? Has been said justly, you should not compare ourselves against an average OECD or some other countries, similar countries, right? But also it doesn't make much sense to simply compare tax burden numbers. Today we heard two numbers about the tax proportion to GDP. Somebody said 30, somebody said 32. But I do think both of you are correct, and I tell you why. Many people say, when I say tax burden, they take into account all incomes going into the budget. Then it's 32. 2015, complete year, it's 30+% collected from taxes. But income is higher. Also, it's divided by GDP, which includes the shadow sector, and the shadow sector does not pay tax. And in this, I agree with Maksim that we have this problem, shadow economy, and it's serious. The ones who pay these 30%, well, they pay also for the shadow business. So we undercollect and underestimate the tax burden here. And there's rent within the tax payments, subsoil tax and things like that, mineral extraction tax, that changes all the time on the daily basis, on an hourly basis even, when prices of oil change. In 2015, we lost 12 to 15% from the subsoil tax because of decreased oil prices, and that's 15 against 14. Difficult to measure, though. And it has limited value, whatever we manage or measure or calculate. What do I want to say more?
So, what do we have to do? I absolutely agree with Anton that we have to count the tax burden only considering the costs, and when we discuss what has to be cut or increased, because we are talking about both the tax burden and the public expenses. If we increase the VAT, if we reduce the social contributions or what. The economic practice of other countries shows that this is also a very important issue. Let me interrupt you. There was a suggestion, not Siluanov's suggestion, but You know, we have a very low VAT burden. I like this, saying, you see, this is too much democracy. I'm too democratic and now everybody can cut me short. What is it? So my question is to the business community, not Siluanov, not Oreshkin, but to Mr. Sinelnikov and Murylev. We were talking about science, mathematics, and so on, but that's not what I'm talking about. There was a specific proposal. If we talk about a total tax burden, including the tax receipts, so including everything, he suggested what? Let's calculate increase of VAT with reduction of contributions. No. That was the third time when I wanted to praise you, but you didn't give me the microphone. You know, if we calculate the fiscal burden based on the methodology of President of Russian Federation, I mean the one that he approved in March last year. Didn't you hear Anton Siluanov said he agrees with the presidential policy? We too agree with the president. He agreed with the economy on social contributions. Well, he proclaimed that at the Federal Assembly, it would be difficult not to agree with him. So if we calculate based on the single methodology, the total fiscal burden, we can include the insurance, various insurances and other things. But again, this law should be a law because some payments are like taxes, but they are not considered like taxes. That's why I would agree with the Minister of Finance that we have too high social contributions. This should be redistributed, but how? If we could agree here during this panel discussion, I mean the business community and the key ministers and experts, that we have to calculate the aggregate fiscal burden, and in this context, we should make suggestions of how to further fine-tune this without increasing fiscal burden on business. We have sorry. I wanted to cut short Mr. Sinelnikov-Murylev. Mr. Sinelnikov-Murylev was already executed. No, not. You did that at the parliament. We have 34% of contributions, pension contributions, and this is considered already a low one. It was 28.5 in 1920s. You have a very long memory. 100 years of October Revolution. This year we're celebrating. You know, when years ago the state Duma did not allow to increase the medical insurance contributions rate, while we were fighting for this, I felt internally, I felt your support, honestly. And no, at your committee, it was stated that there is a step-by-step increase of fiscal burden on businesses. And you suggested that this should be handled by the Ministry of Finance. And this year, we will also cancel the regressive contributions rate, and this will happen if we don't watch this. Stop thanking the Minister of Finance. Let's come down to business. We don't have time if we keep on thanking. All the time is wasted on thanking each other. So my question once again, do you think it possible and do you think it advisable, like Anton Siluanov said, do you think it possible and advisable to rebalance the system by changing some indirect taxes and reduce the payroll taxes and contributions? I think, yes, if we make the employers pay less, then we will free certain funds for other things. We'll give them other opportunities. The total burden would be the same, but then it's easier to adjust the VAT rate. My question goes to the ministers. The idea that was just voiced about reduction of payroll taxes by increasing some indirect taxes, if this could be discussed, we understand that this would differently affect different industries. So if we make a general decision, would we be able to give certain privileges to industries that would really suffer from such a change? Any change of the tax system really entails a certain impact on different industries. When we start talking about progressive personal income tax, it's also about the regional policy. If we reduce the low rates and increase the upper rates, no, we said we are not discussing this. Why do you follow the example of Olga Golodets, who said that Russia would increase personal income tax? No, you should always try to calculate the indirect effect. And in case of doing this or doing that, you should always calculate ahead what would happen to the industries. So you are ready to suggest? No, we always have to calculate it. Anton, we understand that structural changes will take place because for some industries, the fiscal burden will be lower, but for some industries, the tax burden will increase. Right, we have to analyze all of this. We have time, we have the whole year ahead, like our president told us. But we also have to analyze simultaneously not just the impact, but also the existing privileges and preferences the industries currently have. We have to look at those they already have, whether they are really effective, advisable, and if they really produce the result for which they were meant. So if we talk about what has to be changed, we have to first discuss what currently is. I wouldn't like any increase of the tax burden, and therefore we have to very carefully analyze all the proposals and compare this with the existing system. Mr. Murylev, you are going to deliver a lecture after the panel discussion. You will say what you were going to. Yes, yes. You interrupted me, so I was just theorizing. No, I'm not a theoretical guru. I'm not a crazy professor. No, usually, normally, we shouldn't suggest comparing this from one side, from other side. Experts. One of the, somebody said, experts tyranny. Somebody said so. No, 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 we don't need this. So, I love your joke about the experts tyranny. So, what we just discussed is quite an interesting approach. And theoretically, we should be in favor of it. But there is another approach which theoretically makes sense and was implemented in practice, and Russia tested this in 2002. So, there is another approach, increasing VAT, decreasing the profit tax. The VAT rate goes up, the importers are paying it as well as the others, but the profit tax goes down. The president of Russia gave us the whole 2017 to discuss it, and if we spend the remaining 45 minutes to discuss everything and come to a conclusion, you'll have nothing to do for the rest of the year. That's wrong. You haven't said that, but anyway, let me remind you what you said. And I have a question to the Minister of Economy. If we talk about different sectors, let's start with simple things. Russia and OPEC agreed on freezing the crude oil production. Will that change the oil tax system? Should this affect it? No, you know what's going on now in the oil industry. On the one hand, the oil price increased, the revenues are increasing, so you suggest to leave the oil tax system as it is now. Listen, please. Number two, from the investment point of view, when the oil production is being frozen, no aggressive investment should be made in oil production, right? So there is no sense in changing the system. We just have to see which way the further fine-tuning should be done. But step by step. Because this system is no big threat for anything. But the sanctions that limit our access to technologies, this does not help us. This does not give us an opportunity to implement some shelf oil projects and others. We have limited resources. Do you still think that the tax system should not consider the specifics of the current moment? That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that we need to analyze, we need to further do the fine-tuning. Okay, next question. The specific cost of oil production is $17 to $20 per barrel. How does the current oil price, this is a question to the minister and Minister Shokhin, you know, now all these disputes about the oil sector are about the amount of profit the oil sector now receives in the current price environment. And I would like to hear what you think about preserving this super profit rate in the oil industry when we very much increase the tax burden, for instance, and fiscal burden on other sectors. Is that fair? That's a really deep question. In the previous years, we had this Dutch disease, as we call it, and considering the tax system which makes it possible to make super profits in the oil industry, all money, including investments, were channeled from processing industries into the oil industry, because in the oil industry it made more sense to invest. You made high returns. And in the oil industry, the taxation system is very beneficial. They have lots of benefits and cuts and whatever, considering the geology, considering this and that. Sometimes this is even done based on the expert opinion, where the tax service cannot even check whether the experts really say the truth or not. Is the oil field, does it have too much water or whatever? So we are saying that we need to proceed to a different system of taxation of the oil industry. It's high time we do that. It's high time to cancel these individual preferences and privileges, because these privileges are given by the industry, industry ministries, and they are not supposed to make a final decision on the tax. And I think that we should have long ago changed the tax system for the oil industry, and if not since this year, since next year, we need to implement a new tax regime for the oil industry. First, we can implement this as an experiment and then roll it out for the whole industry. Do I understand you right? Do I understand you right that 2 years successful work not to on fighting against the law on the tax, on introduction of a tax on financial results. No, this is called differently. You know, we are canceling at the same time the privileges which currently exist. Privileges and discounts. Now is the right time to say a word and thank the Minister of Finance. Yes, that's right. We've been discussing this tax for 2 years, and I wouldn't say the business community was trying to inhibit this discussion, and the Ministry of Energy asked us to include this topic into the plan of favoring economic growth. And they asked us to include this into the agenda. This is what we are going to discuss in the coming 2 years. I think that this will be discussed between the ministries, the Ministry of Finance and so on. Well, it all depends how you call this tax. So I would like to attract your attention to one thing. I do agree, in the oil industry we have a lot of privileges, but who do they apply to? The state-owned corporations. We have a limitation to work in the shelf and in the Siberia and so on. Only the state-owned companies have the problem. And these are only state-owned companies that have these privileges. And you have to reduce the share of the state in the business, because the state has more opportunities to make more privileges for itself. That's why we need to reduce the lobbying potential of state-owned companies. And we have to give the we have to increase competitive environment, increase competition in this industry, and not only in this industry, but in other industries as well. This year, we are supposed to continue the work we started a few years ago regarding assessment of all the existing taxes and privileges. And some of these privileges are individual, some of them are just decided on a case by case and are not efficient and do not yield the desired effect. That's why for a number of years we suggest some investment benefits on the profit tax, which could be better for the investors than the privileges that depend on the business conditions and so on. And if we reduce the number of privileges, but the privileges would become more attractive, I think this would only be to the benefit. Do you suggest to come back to the system of old investments privileges? No. He's talking about NDD, the regime we are talking about, for the oil industry and investments privileges. That's different. I agree. Yeah. You know, I would come to what Anton Siluanov is saying. The state-owned companies, yes, they do have privileges, but they have also their costs. These state-owned companies, they have to implement the orders of the government. So you have to just analyze whether the privilege were given and was used the right way to produce the desired effect or not. When talking about the taxation of the oil industry, we just have to calculate it, remembering that this is the hen that lays golden eggs, and the new system of the new tax system shouldn't kill this hen laying golden eggs. Today, this industry, to a large extent, accounts for the economic development in the Russian Federation, while I do agree with the approach. You just, it was just mentioned that the state-owned companies, they have a burden of responsibility and so on and so forth, but this is what? Instead of creating a normal tax system when all companies pay the taxes and then the state allocates this money in the framework of the budget. At the same time, we create privileges for the state-owned companies. After that, we start a discussion of the efficiency of state-owned companies, and if something is wrong, we always try to justify them, saying, yes, but they have to implement what the government tells them, and so on. This is diagnosis. Yes, if this is diagnosis, then tell me what remedy should we use. We have to try to eliminate the factors that distort the desired effects. No. But GDP. In the GDP, 70% is the state property. What competition are we talking about? If 70% of GDP is the state property, we are increasing it, but what efficiency are we talking about? We are currently discussing the tax system, but it seems that we are discussing nothing, just punctuation in the text. We should discuss something different. In your first program interview, you didn't say anything. Now, if you say something, the mass media will distort your idea. You mean that we should have guessed what you meant. No, competition is the driver of economic development. Do I understand that the burden on state corporations, state-owned companies, as a factor that increases economic development, this time of state-owned corporations is over? Do I get you right? No, the parliament will voice its opinion when they discuss it. I'm asking you personally, do you really think, or did I get you right, that you consider the state-owned corporations ineffective? I didn't say so, but it's quite evident that the past 5 to 10 years did not increase their efficiency. Now, everybody is going to say what the Minister of Economic Development said and what he meant, actually. Okay, what do we do with SMEs? Should we do nothing should we kill or what, Maxim? Or maybe we ask our theoretician about it? Okay. Sergey will tell us what we do to SME. Do you have any ideas? Are we going to tackle this question or are we going to let them live? We better don't do anything to SMEs. Let them live. I wouldn't do anything to big corporations either. I would let them alone. Listen, and what about the medium enterprises? Any business in any region asks, please don't touch us, please don't change anything. We will be able to survive in the current conditions. You know, this is the first time when we see a consensus of opinions of all the panelists we have. So for mass media, we agreed not to touch the businesses, and this will be the best solution for them. Okay, talking about cutting the costs, we can cut the costs on state administration then. When you cut the state administration costs, usually results in their increase. You should know that, considering your past experience. So what about SME? I do agree about the SMEs and big business. The stability of tax system is a value we should work on. When we grant special tax preferences, well, I do have many suggestions of what has to be changed, but I wouldn't do anything right now. Let's ask our foreign partners. How does that look from your points of view? You heard now the idea that we shouldn't touch any businesses. We shouldn't change anything for them. What about the OECD? What do you think about it?
I think the key for businesses is to make the tax system as simple as possible, whether you're an SME or a multinational company. Obviously, this has a bigger impact for the SMEs because when SMEs start, and it is important to try to encourage the growth of SMEs because they are the ones that create jobs far more than the larger enterprises. And so when they start, what are they trying to do? They're trying to establish a profitable business. They're not so focused on taxation. But taxation can create problems for them if it is too complex. So I think I don't know the details of how you tax them now, but I do think that you need to look at it to make sure it is as simple as possible, and also to consider if you are providing benefits to business, that you need to ensure that they're just not directed at the incumbent companies, the large companies, because things like tax credits, well, small businesses often don't have a profit at the beginning, and so a tax credit doesn't really help them. So you need to look at the overall benefits and who will actually benefit from any deductions or credits you provide to business.
Thank you. Вы знаете, у меня вопрос предельно простой в этой ситуации.
I have quite a simple question in this context. If we take the single taxation imputed tax on imputed earnings, do I get you right that you suggested to increase it? How much was it an increase? By 15%? No. If the tax burden is increased by 15%, the single tax on imputed earnings will not survive. If we preserve the current level, like we did that last year, this is 2,400,000 subjects. This will impact the lives of millions of people, right? And we understand that when we apply this to small business, we are kind of yes, we are great guys, we did this, but we didn't take this money from our pocket. We did that due to the budget of the regional budget will not receive this money.
So, what is your position on this? In terms of how we see this happening, what is the role of the tax system to support small business, considering that small business produces income for the regions, the budgets of the regions? Why am I saying this? I have a feeling that we are ready to do a tax reform at the expense of anybody, but not budget expenses. Benefits on income tax, okay, because this is the budgets of the regions. Small business, it's also income of the regions. But and VAT paid into the federal budget, and you will not sacrifice that. Don't you think then that the adjustment of the tax system is being done at the expense of all budgets except the state, the federal budget? And especially small business, because this money goes exclusively into the regional local budgets. Well, the issue correctly stated. In that respect, I agree with Andrei that at the federal level, we did make and do make decisions on taxes which go into the regional budgets and taxes that paid into the federal budgets. And this is not the right thing to do. Because with the federation, it turns out we decide at the level of federation what would be the budgets of the regions. And they have their own expenses. So then we agreed, the position of the parliament was like this. Let us stop regulating tax laws of the regions. And we decided that we need two keys if we want to make a decision at the federal level on regional taxes or taxes, federal taxes that go into the regional budgets. Let's ask their opinion, at least the regions, and let's seek their agreement to that, the municipalities and the regions. If it's benefit on tax on property and tax on small business, we may want to create better conditions for small business, but we need consulting about that with municipalities and the regions. Now, my idea is about small business taxation. I agree, it should be very simple procedure. And we need to have less reporting from small business, and we are going to work in that area. In particular, I envision the following steps. Simplifying first, taxation, unifying taxes for all small businesses. Many small businesses tell us we have achieved a certain level of income, like 150 million rubles, beyond which we would be called medium business, and the tax burden would increase. So we're not motivated to increase revenue, to pass that threshold. And they ask, let's make this transition smoother from individual entrepreneurs to micro business, to small business, to medium business. I believe this is the area we should focus first. And second, we need to simplify the taxation system. Most of the businesses, micro businesses, can be moved to patent system. It's very simple. If you have a small trading outlet, buy a patent and go on with your business. For small business, it must be very simple procedure of taxation and a minimum of reporting. If a person works with a patent, then you don't have to report anything. You simply pay a certain fixed amount to the budget for doing your business and go on without any reporting. Small business is important because it creates jobs, etc. Taxes from them, important, but this is not the main objective we want to get from small business. Well, and we should praise the Minister of Finance for this statement. Clear. I will not comment. A last statement from Mr. Shokhin. Dear colleagues, we could stop at that, but I have one question before we do that. That's worth discussing. The President said, 2017, let's discuss all proposals about tax with the involvement of business. Here, I would like to ask one question from the participants. How do you see organizing this discussion? Where should it go on? Because what I started from, there's going to be, well, a fight of interpretation. What does adjustment of tax system mean? And each ministry would want to get better conditions for themselves. Why am I asking? Well, we refer to tax code, but we don't have a tax code as a unified document. There was first part of tax code, second part of tax code. We did the first part first with a big load and burden on the business, and the second part of the tax code has a lot of conflicting provisions with the first part, and presumption of innocence of taxpayer. That the tax authority had to prove that the person has not paid taxes. This is in the second part. But overall, our tax code is a document which can be interpreted in so many ways. And we don't have letters of alphabet in some articles, not enough, because there are so many sub-items, sub-bullets within each of the articles, very complex. So I have a feeling that today, tax code, tax law, from a very simple mechanism that where it was created in 1998, now it's so burdensome, so difficult to understand and interpret. So the discussion is not only about tax burden, but how the business is going to apply tax law. So, colleagues, how do we see 2017? It has started. Basically, this is the first discussion on instructions of the president. Start discussing the tax code. So how do you see it happening in 2017? I believe to make it more productive, those discussions more productive, I believe it would be great if we immediately involve the lawmakers on what we want to achieve in terms of the tax reform. We already have 4 main business associations involved. We prepare proposals from them. After that, once we get those, we would want to involve the State Duma and all other stakeholders to start discussing our proposals. What do we want to get from the law? Otherwise, it's going to be traditional, like we did first within business associations, then we go to ministries, then that goes to the State Duma. The State Duma communicates with the ministries, etc., etc. It's a lengthy process. I believe the optimal way would be to do it like this: immediately involve the parliament, the State Duma, and small business. What Anton spoke about. Of course, I support the position of the minister, but we shouldn't be forgetting that small business, well, small business in our country is micro business, what we call small business, because 94% out of small companies are micro companies according to our law, less than 15 employees. Building relationships with the small business, considering that the quantity is so high, we need to be aware that the size of companies is really low. Mr. Siluanov mentioned reporting. Recently, there was a meeting with the president, and the president agreed. We discussed that at that meeting, and president supported that reporting should go down. But after that, more reports came in to statistical authorities. What does it mean? You imagine what it means to a small company. Normally, it's families. They will need to support one additional position of accounting, etc. And if we add reporting from the tax authority, you need to also buy software to be able to make proper calculations, etc. So we have to be serious about that. And reporting is an important matter. For small business itself, what is the priority for them? First, markets. Second, access to funding. And third, a reduction of administrative pressure, like audits, inspections, etc., etc. These are the three priorities for small businesses, and these areas should be the focus of our attention. We don't have so many complaints from small business that the taxes are too high. What do you think? 2017. Understand it's very important to make sure that this discussion is very open and public. That the very discussion, well, that any person, any businessman could participate. Sergey said that we need to involve the State Duma and organize the discussion at the venue of the State Duma. I do agree with that, because the first part of the tax code, while was organized like this. Well, let me tell you this. First of all, my gratitude from the business that you have been regular in discussing the subjects of the budget, tax policy, and openly so. What are my suggestions? First of all, we have instructions from the president for business associations, together with the government, have to work out a program until 2025, where tax issues are very prominent. And he clearly stated that within 2017 we need to organize the discussion and make all the decisions in 2018, so that the tax system assures stable economic growth. And we have started this process. How to organize it further? Remember, we had a dream to hold discussions of the main areas of tax policy in February. Hardly are we going to discuss the tax policy for midterm this February, but we should start early anyway. 2017, we should live through this year, so that in February 2018, maybe on the eve of presidential election, we should already discuss the first version of the tax policy for the midterm. And I agree that it should be a single, unified document, budget policy, tax policy, tariff policy, at one high-level document, because some documents have lower status. This should be the higher status document, at a very high status document that should be supported publicly at the State Duma and approved by a resolution of the State Duma. So if we move this schedule forward, and if we can bring it to Duma in February, then I would suggest we adopt tax laws earlier. If we have 1st of December a deadline to adopt the laws for next year, I would suggest doing that this time in the spring session of Parliament, so that bylaws can be adopted before the end of the year based on these main guidelines for the tax policy. And since there will be structural changes in the tax system, and for some industries and companies where the tax burden would be higher, we need to provide for a grace period, maybe 2 years or so, before that additional burden falls onto them. So if we agree on this technology, that element of uncertainty I talk about, considering that we had 2-year discussions, and now people say we would be discussing it 2017 at venues like Gaidar Forum. 2018 we start discussing it at the State Duma. That would reinforce uncertainty. We should compress the schedule and try make it most efficient way, and suggest 13th of March there would be tax conference of our organization. Start discussing it then. What do you think about that? What does suddenly the debate is not that hot, but that's what I have to say first. But I have something to reply there. Well, practical implementation is very important, of course. Like Katyrin said yesterday, well, we have venues where we meet with businesses, etc. And I disagree that tax code is that bad. We have customs code, which is much worse. And there's a hard currency control law, also has some impact on taxes, and some principles embodied there are very, very old. They're worse. So your statement, they're worse than tax code. Yes, right. And we have to deal with those documents as well, because that brings the direct connection with the tax. This is my opinion. Maxim? Well, we need to achieve a result, right? We don't want to simply change tax rates. We want the result we need to achieve is trust between all stakeholders. This is extremely important. So it must be a very broad discussion with the involvement of all parties. But how are we going to discuss it? Trust, I understand. How are we going to discuss it? Actively, not passively. What other adjectives do you want to use? No. Can you please more detail, or you can only use this sort of words? No, we do it under your guidance, okay? Now Anton is going to tell us how it's going to be in real terms. Well, we have instructions from the President, decision of the government on the need to provide their ideas on these changes. The Ministry of Finance is responsible for that. We would guide the whole process. We started already discussing the improvement of the tax system. We will do that together with business. We'll have a working group in the ministry with the involvement of the Ministry of the Economy and the stakeholders. Once we know what would be potential solutions, we will bring that to the venue or to the Parliament through Andrei. And I'm sure that in the spring session, we will define the main approaches of how to adjust the tax system, so that we can refine that system by the end of the year. And I'm sure by next Gaidar Forum, the proposals on the improvement of the tax system will be defined in the format which will have been discussed by all stakeholders, the business, the parliament, ministries. Next Gaidar Forum, we will be ready to bring that for open discussion. Tax system will not be discussed single-handedly, together with other ideas about how to achieve economic growth. What Anton has said, let's wow wherever we are, no matter where destiny brings us. Every year, this day, we'll get together at the Gaidar Forum, and next time we will discuss the final proposals on the tax reform. Now, unless anybody wants to add anything, have we said what we wanted? Then I have a few words. I kept silent, as you see, the whole morning. So may I say a few words now? We have agreed that the main quality of a stable tax system is trust. As been said, trust can be created only if there's honest public debate of what is offered. But let's agree here on matters of principle. Like Alexander, what you suggested, essentially, we need to submit proposals by spring. We need to create a product which can be brought to Parliament in spring, right? And without and we have to combine the tax discussion with other instruments of economic policy, budget, customs, and many other issues. And I believe since it's going to be this many things to be discussed, I'm afraid the discussion will not go on well enough. I also understand the government has to discuss those main guidelines for tax policy at the end of April of this year. There's no time for public debate of this document. Very little time. So let's maybe agree, Anton. Next week, we submit a bill that we will produce a single document for tax, budget, and customs. Adjustments to budget code. Let's submit this bill next week so that we start moving fast right now. And for this, we need to be aware that we have to discuss everything at the same time. The tax issues and budget obligations of the government. Do we agree on that? Can we state it right now? We are not going to wait for next Gaidar forum. We'll submit that bill next week. Okay, agreed. That was first. Second, this bill, not later than early March, should be submitted for parliamentary hearings in the State Duma so that we can start public discussion, like been mentioned by Sergey and Alexander, so that we can start public discussion. We can do that for a month before it will be submitted to the government. Are you happy with this schedule, Anton? Let's do it in March, okay? Just to remind you, according to law and budget code, you need to submit this document a minimum a month in advance. It is brought to the government. This is according to law. Do you want to change the law? Then it's not a good way to start. In March, we will submit this document to a parliamentary discussion. Do I understand it correctly? Then we need a month from the start of the discussion in Parliament. And if we don't have enough time, you will suggest that the government will consider that the document later in May rather than April. And this is a matter of trust. It's very important. The trust will be guaranteed. Don't worry. Okay, agreed then. So, two things. First, we submit draft as a single document for all areas, and we discuss it publicly in Parliament with the involvement of all business associations, the expert community, etc., to assure very broad discussion. Agreed, right? Then let us try to define what should be in that document. What would be the contents? First, we have agreed that there should be a real level of fiscal burden defined in that document. including non-tax payments. It should be our understanding as against other economies where our tax system is, because there are differing viewpoints on them. My viewpoint is this. I believe that the tax burden on business in this country is excessive, without limit. This is my opinion. I do not insist that my viewpoint is correct, but in the document that we're going to produce, I would like to have a detailed analysis for us to see where we are in terms of tax burden as against other countries. Understand our common position here is that with this adjustment of the tax system, that the key objective is not to increase the tax burden. There could be some adjustments within the structure, what you said, Anton, what Sergey talked about. We could change indirect taxes. The first objective should be to reduce the tax burden on payroll. But as a matter of principle, we should not increase the tax burden as the main objective. Right, the right word would be fiscal load rather than tax load. Inadmissible, right? That's why we want to discuss tax and budget policy, because we have to be aware this is all associated with the obligations assumed by the state. And these instructions set by the president should also be acted upon. Agree, Anton? Okay. And the next one. This is my personal. I am confident, and I will insist on in Parliament, that the adjustment of the tax system should set as its main objective during the upcoming period, this medium-term period, it should provide for gradual decrease of the tax burden. The business should see a promise in the future, and this promise, in my viewpoint, is only in the decrease of the tax burden. Next, stimulating functions of the tax system. Unfortunately, today, we keep on creating so many versions. Greenfields, the territories of advanced development, so many special economic zones, etc., etc. This accelerated development territories, whom are they running faster than others? There are benefits, nobody analyzed the efficiency of those benefits, but the ministries keep on insisting on those benefits. So the objective of the adjustment of the tax system is evaluating the efficiency of existing benefits. The inefficient benefits should be cancelled, and we should stop this practice. And we've started discussing the contents of the document, right? What I suggest then, the new tax benefits cannot be introduced for an indefinite period of time, just for a definite period of time. Would you agree on that? Next, when we speak about the efficiency of a tax system, we should take into account the notion of budget federalism. We should stop the practice of reforming the tax system at the expense of regional and municipal budgets. This is, well, there is some language in the Constitution which says that the regional authorities institute their own taxes and collect their taxes. They don't have this right now. I suggest giving them back this right, which is incorporated into the Constitution. But that would imply that they will have more responsibility, the regions and municipalities, on forming their budgets. But this is part of a normal political system, for them to be responsible before their citizens. And now I would like to get back to what I already said, that the tax system.
We need to ensure the implementation of the state's commitment, and that should be stimulated by the tax system. And like you said, the tax system should become the key instrument of implementation of the economic growth policy, economic growth acceleration. And I think the key conclusion of our dialogue should be that without further fine-tuning of the tax system, at least in the context as we discussed it, stable and high-quality economic growth is impossible, right? I think I just summarized what you said. I didn't say anything on my own behalf. Anton, your face is like you had it yesterday. January thesis of the tax policy. Like in Lenin's time, he had April thesis, so yes, very good illusion. You know, we read the same textbooks. It was the textbook on history of the history of the Communist Party. And trust me, that was not Lenin who wrote this. But, you know, your opinion, we like it even more. Okay, colleagues, do we agree with this statement? Publicly, everything has been said and stated, and now people would be able to double-check whether you implement what you just said. And this is how trust can be won. I would like to thank all the experts, all the panelists for coming this morning for this session. It's an important session, and the topics we discussed, they are of crucial importance for the population of the country and for the country. And I'd like to thank all those who came here on the next morning after celebrating the old New Year, who came to discuss this boring subject of improvement of tax system. This is an exploit. Thank you for coming.